we're trying to build a AI powered like answer engine that everyone should be able to use every day as part of their daily lives, as part of their work. AI is not the product. AI is like what makes the product work.
Henry Modisett, welcome to Design Better.
Thanks for having me.
Henry, you're doing some interesting work, you and your team, over at Perplexity, which is a fascinating tool, AI tool for deep research, some new stuff that you've recently released, a browser. I have to say I didn't see that one coming, although when I saw the announcement, I thought, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, we want to jump into all of that stuff, but we always like to start from the beginning. In your origin story, you're sort of a unique designer in that you're a person who understands design, but you also understand computer science. In fact, you got a degree in computer science. Is that right?
Yeah. In high school, I was very much like an artsy kid, mostly doing music as my outlet, and certainly as my identity, my chosen teenager identity. And, but I liked tinkering with computers, I guess. And when I was applying to university, I got into art school, music school, and engineering school. And my mom, in her infinite wisdom, told me to go to engineering school, and I listened to her. And so, yeah, then I went into that world and certainly surrounded myself with a lot of different types of people than I was used to. And it definitely changed, opened up a lot of new skills for me, and a lot of new ways of thinking. So it was good for me.
Yeah. Why do you think that was good? I mean, you could have gone into music and art and gotten a lot of different perspectives as well. Why was engineering the right path?
I think I love sort of being exposed to, I guess, like one, there's a worldview that you get from engineering and I think architecture that you kind of realize that like everything was made by somebody. Everything around you, like somebody had to figure out how to do it, make a decision how it should work, and figure out what materials are required, and there's like a million problems that were solved to just like build the thing that we're in right now. That's like a worldview that I find so empowering, because that also means that like you can change anything. You can dream it up and make it happen, or work with people to make it happen. I think that is like a wonderful perspective to gain. And then actually learning how to make things is just like empowering in a very individualistic way. Rather than, I obviously spent a lot of time making art and graphic design and music in high school, but you're making, these like artifacts for yourself. It's very much like a practice of expression and art and all the wonderful ways that art is. But I find that like learning how to make something for other people, and being exposed to just like design in architecture as like a gift of utility to the world, like that, all of that was just, it really opened up like a lot of things for me.
So you spent a big chunk of your early career at Quora, and I used the product early on, and I think one of the things that stood out was like you're getting answers from these very well-known people, and I think that was part of the early kind of product stickiness and interest and virality, was like somebody that you wouldn't expect was on there answering a question. So there was sort of a inherent trust built in there. Yeah. And I'm curious to what did you learn from your experience there at Quora that you sort of translated over to Perplexity, where it also feels like, trust and verifying sources is a core part of the product experience?
Yeah. I mean, man, I could do this could be the whole podcast case. So there's a very kind of like high level, maybe like mission perspective that is like always, this is why I fell in love with Quora, wanting to work there. The point of Quora was, there's a lot of information on the internet, but there's more information still in people's heads, in their lived experiences and their opinions and their perspectives. And in a lot of cases, still just like facts. Wikipedia was sort of like at the time, like the only, repository for information, meant for like the long term. And the goal was to like build a mechanism for extracting all that other information and putting it in a place and in a construct that would be organized and discoverable for both humans and machines. I loved that as like a problem. What was wonderful about Quora is the practice of design was definitely like challenging whatever everyone else was doing. All of the designers were coding. They were thinking about product and product mechanics. I think we were like, maybe we're closer to like game designers than like other software designers and what we talked about every day. And a lot of this all comes from Facebook, the coaching tree of like Facebook, early Facebook, building a social network. How do you do that? Well, you need to run a lot of A/B tests. You need to tweak the mechanics of how it works, trying to optimize the machine. There's a lot of like very kind of system-y design thinking there. And that the head of design at Quora was Rebecca Cox. And she just sort of like decided how she just reinvented the role as they were building the company. So I learned a lot about like, not only like, hey, there's like a very different way to work. Also, you can design a company from scratch with a lot of intentionality, like with the roles. You can say like, this is the role that we need to make the company successful. And then I would say the third major thing I learned from Quora is just building a social network, like how to do it actually is incredibly hard. How you think about it, how you operate internally, how do you use data, how you work with at the time. I mean, one of the kind of secrets of Quora was we had like the highest concentration of machine learning engineers in the Bay Area, like for a couple of years. And you look at all those people now and they're all doing wonderful things in AI. So just kind of like got exposed to so many things in that environment, just by being surrounded by a lot of really brilliant people.
Common theme between Quora and what you're doing now at Perplexity is learning how people learn. What have you learned about that, and how does it change the way you learn?
I mean, I love teaching myself things, and I think building products that like accelerate that for other people is wonderful, because like there are people who naturally are like that and they do it. But it's also fun to kind of like, challenge when people say, oh, I'm not good at a thing, and give them like a new way to become good at a thing. A lot of people, like my favorite example is a lot of people will say like, well, I'm not very good at math. And I don't really think that's true. I bet you just haven't had it explained to you in a way that resonates. Because I have like a personal experience with that. Like I never was good at math until I had tutors. I was never good at computer science until I started writing ActionScript and made it visual. I didn't understand object-oriented programming at all until I rendered a circle on the screen and like made it red. And so I think that like everybody learns in different ways. They need different metaphors. They need different perspectives. They need one-on-one. They need to talk to an AI. They need a group setting. It doesn't matter. So getting to like bring tools like that to the world, and especially with Perplexity being the sort of like ultimate bridge between you and like any information, because it can translate it into like whatever you need it to do. That's very fun to work on. And I think there's just like a greater appetite, and it's almost like I want to make that part of our culture is, the hunger for knowledge and the sort of empowerment you get from learning, and, democratization of whatever you want to learn. You can just go learn how to do that. Cause I think people kind of get stuck in the systems that they're in, and they beat themselves up when they don't succeed in those systems. So that's like that's like a fun thing to get to contribute to.
Design Better is supported by Masterclass. My wife gives me a hard time because I fall into rabbit holes often. I'm curious about the world, and I'm in a perpetual pursuit of knowledge. What can I say? I could spend hours doom scrolling or getting lost in Instagram, but I know that won't make me a better person. Instead, what I do is I pop open Masterclass on my phone and I dive into an enriching topic, like how to eat better, which is taught by Michael Pollan. He's one of my favorite authors. And Nobel laureate Paul Krugman has a masterclass on economics that I can jump into. Or I can learn about writing from Margaret Atwood, graphic design from David Carson, photography from Annie Leibovitz, or documentary filmmaking from Ken Burns. Now, that's a great use of my time and attention. And I think it's a great use of your attention too. Whether you want to learn to write better, improve your public speaking, enhance your creativity, or become a better cook,
Hey, Masterclass has in-depth expertise that you can tap into anytime and any place. You can access Masterclass on your phone, your computer, your tablet, smart TV, or even in audio mode. You can listen to these classes. And right now, Design Better listeners get an additional 15% off an annual membership at masterclass.com/designbetter. That's 15% off at masterclass.com/designbetter.
A common theme that Eli and I have seen across a lot of different companies, people who are working in the tech space, is sort of ironic. They don't have time to experiment with AI tools. They know about the amazing stuff that's happening, but they don't always know what kind of sets tools apart. Could you give people just like the quick nickel tour of what makes Perplexity different and how it solves problems for people?
Yeah. It's one part of it is it's a moving target. There's like a lot of consolidation in the market, but fundamentally, when we started the company, we were only thinking about answers and information and the sort of robustness of that information, and we saw like a huge opportunity because if you just use an AI model as like interacting with it like directly, you have to remember that it's just trained on the data that it's trained on. It only knows so much. And that paired with the most wonderful property of LLMs is they always say something. The outcome is that they make up a lot of things because they don't know everything and they're always going to say something. And so from the beginning, we've always had like, I think a very different kind of strong opinion on like, okay, we need to do everything we can to make the answers like be full of robust information. Like it should feel like it's giving you the right answer. I mean, we should do everything we can to give you the right answer. And we should also strip out all the silly kind of personality. Like you're asking a question, you want to read the answer. You don't want to have a conversation with like a fake human. And so that being like a foundational ideal has led us to build a lot of things. But most notably, like we combined search with the LLM at the beginning. That's like why we exist. That's how we got to this point. Because it makes the answers accurate. And not only just sort of because it reaches the depth of information that may be on the internet or through other like API access that we've set up, but it also like, it's like kind of always up to date. Like you can say like, what's going on today in Athens and it'll tell you because that's, if the information is there, we'll find it and tell you. So that is like a different, very different mission. We're trying to build a AI powered like answer engine that everyone should be able to use every day as part of their daily lives, as part of their work. It's not an AI, like AI is not the product. AI is like what makes the product work. And so if you find yourself like wanting to know stuff all the time and you want to believe that like what you're getting is accurate or at least kind of comes from some good sources, and you want to believe that every single time you ask a question, then like that's the product. And that's like why people become hooked.
So I was listening to a show this week that was the hosts were making the argument that the browsers are going away. Like everybody's going to just use this voice interface in the future and you won't need browsers. And I kind of called BS on it because I think as humans, we need to interact in a multimodal way with, the information and applications we have. You don't want everything delivered by voice chat. So that's a little bit of segue into a new product y'all are working on called Comet, which is a new browser. How'd you make that decision to build a browser, and what are some? Yes, there you go. She's pointing to the logo on your shirt there. What drove the decision to focus on that as one of your new offerings?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people in the world, they couldn't tell you the difference between a search engine and a browser. A browser is the most commonly used pieces of software in the world. Like everyone, if you're using any kind of computer or phone, you're probably using a browser at some point in your day. And it kind of like to get to own as like a designer, both the browser itself and the search engine experience, that lets us like blend everything in a much more seamless way. It lets us do more powerful things and create more useful things for the user. And it also like opens us up to being able to do all the agentic stuff that we've built. And we don't, we have like a, very kind of clear design philosophy of like, we don't like the agent thing, it just happens. Like, again, most people in the world, they don't think about any of this. They don't want to think about AI. They just want to type something in and get the outcome. But we can give you that outcome. We can give you new outcomes that you didn't even think were possible. And the main thing is like, you kind of have this, like, you have 3 new ways before. Like if you in an old browser, you're manually looking for links and clicking on them and scrolling. And if you're trying to find information or maybe even get an action done, like if you really add up the seconds, it becomes like a long time for things you don't really want to do yourself or you don't need to. With our browser, you now can either delegate it, you can do it collaboratively with an AI, or you can still do it yourself because it still works like a normal browser. And that's like, I can say that in the abstract. You're probably like, I don't really know what that means. But, when you try it and you find those queries that do something magical for you, there's like, everyone's getting these like aha moments. And it's fun to have like brought in something actually quite novel, to one of the most like, common pieces of software that everyone's used to.
Can you give us any examples of what those magical moments look like?
Like the fundamental thing is like, you can just ask it to do whatever thing you're doing on the web, any kind of workflow. You can just like ask it to do that workflow for you. It could be like, maybe you're in a spreadsheet and you're confronted with something tedious. Like I got to go through each one of these columns and, annotate something. You can open the sidebar and say like, can you do that for me? And then it'll light up and it'll start doing that for you. You can also just like completely delegate it away. And so my funny query that I do with people in real life, is I'll say, order me a green juice to the office. And it'll go and open up DoorDash and find a restaurant that sells green juices and buy it for me and send it to the office. And it will show up. And all I did was like type in a sentence. And so you can, the way to think about it is like anything you do on the web, you can just like give it kind of a vague instruction. It's not like writing a SQL query. It does like infer what you mean. And it'll take it from there. And so our goal is just to like make it work, for more powerful things and make it work consistently and quickly. And, I think, it's cool to see, what people do with it, because, we don't really build this sort of stuff coming from like here's 10 use cases, let's nail them. We're more like building like a network density of abilities, and then people show us what they're doing with it. There was one video that went viral the other day on Twitter where some guy was using a web interface to control his smart house. He would log in and change the light color and stuff. And so he just told Comet to change the vibe in my room to be like, more relaxing. And so then Comet goes and opened up that and like started tweaking everything. It's sort of like an interface for anything. And if you think about all the abilities that people have of what they do on the internet, it's quite infinite.
How do you think about designing for trust? I think the core premise where you started, which is we want to give you this deep knowledge, and we want you to trust the validity of this information, which becomes more and more critical these days. But now the tools are doing their things on your behalf.
Yeah.
Make sure that green juice is not mystery liquid that is harmful to me.
Right.
How do you design trust?
It's a lot of details. You want people to feel like they're in control. And so it's just a lot of little UI details, I think. Like we do, like naturally with any agentic thing, the agent is always talking to you and saying what it's doing. It's like, okay, I'm going to go to DoorDash and I'm going to go scroll here and things like that. And when it's on a website, you see little screenshots of what it's doing to kind of prove that it's like actually doing that. And we very intentionally display it in this sort of abstracted view where it's this like timeline. It's meant to be like really easy for you to read. If you want to stare at it, you can. It's almost like this, extreme like loading experience, where you're watching it work and it's talking to you and it's, sharing its notes, but you can always intervene and take over if you want to. So it's a lot of like showing the work, if that makes sense. And, to be honest, like the most important thing we can do is like not fuck it up. It has to actually work. It can't like go off the rails. Like, we only have a few chances to prove ourselves. And if it starts doing the wrong thing, then you're probably going to be scared to try it again. And so the most important way to create trust is just for it to actually work.
Design Better is supported by Saoli. I love to travel, but what I don't like is the hassle of figuring out my cell phone situation when I'm abroad. In the past, I've gone to a kiosk at my destination airport to get a SIM, but who wants to wait in a line after an international flight? Plus, those things always seem a little sketch to me. How much is this going to cost me? Saoli makes all this super easy. You can download their app on your phone, and you can buy an eSIM before you fly, so you're connected the minute that you land. And if you're traveling between countries, you only need one eSIM. You can get a global or a regional plan and travel with the same eSIM plan. You'll save money significantly with an eSIM over your carrier's roaming plans, which gets super pricey quickly. Activate Saoli's security features and browse more confidently. You can change your virtual location, block ads, and stay safer with web protection. All Saoli eSIM plans are compatible for iOS and Android devices. If you travel internationally, this is what you'll need to stay connected without spending a fortune. Download the Saoli app in your app store. Search for Saoli, S-A-I-L-Y. Use code DESIGNBETTER at checkout, and you'll save 15% off your first purchase. Or go to saoli.com/designbetter. That's SAILY.com/designbetter.
Given all the capabilities of these tools as far as actually designing products for AI, how has that changed your workflow for you and your team? I know you mentioned that you were already part of teams that use code a lot within the design process, but now that door is open even further for, like, let's say designers like me who don't have a background in being a developer, makes it very easy to go out and build a prototype. So how is that changing for your team, and what kinds of tools are you taking advantage of?
What I learned working at Quora, I'm working on early kind of machine learning powered product experiences like user feeds and notification systems and automatic emailing things, is that it's really hard to mock all this stuff up because there are infinite states, and so there's a lot of designing these stencils to make sure that I don't know what text is going to be in here, but some kind of text block will be there. So there's a lot of sort of system design, UI system design thinking required to do any kind of non-deterministic product experience. And I find that type of work, it can be done using a static tool, like a Figma, but it's a lot easier to do it in code, even if you're in some kind of prototype environment. The way that I design Perplexity is I would just ask questions and then change the UI and just keep asking more and more questions because I just wasn't sure whether, the way that I was rendering everything was going to work. And so it helps so much to just be able to test it with real outcomes, to test the efficacy of your decisions. So there's kind of a natural requirement. But I found that everybody that dabbles in an environment where they're able to code as designers, they suddenly feel much more empowered. And the sort of world has changed. React exists now. React's pretty easy to write and easy to understand. Swift UI sort of equally so. The abstractions that we're working with are easier than they used to be. I think HTML and CSS, that era, a lot of designers were coding because it's not that hard to understand. And then the kind of MVC framework era got really messy, and designers were having to think about a lot more than they should have. And now we're kind of back to a place where I think things are easier, and you can use AI to generate a lot of your code. So there's this kind of explosion in output happening. I have designers that are fantastic engineers that are teaching designers who've never coded before how to get in there and do it. And it's a really kind of wonderful environment, both because it's empowering for them, but also it's kind of the right way to work for a lot of our problems. It's not the only way we work, but just having it as available to us for things is, it does change everything for how the product designers are working.
And does that go both ways, where engineers are also sort of bleeding into design as well?
It's funny. I found the opposite to be true. They're like, thank God we don't have to write CSS anymore. Because CSS is like, it's not programming. It's like you're learning this like layout language, and you're learning the best practices on how to use it. And it's a thing that seems easy to write, but that's a trap, because it is easy to put stuff on the screen, but it's hard to do it right. It's hard to do it in a way that scales well, that is bug-free, that considers mobile web, whatever. And most of the tweaks you're making, I would call like design decisions for the most part. And so it's almost like let the engineers focus on, bigger engineering problems, thinking about, performance and speed and, like how to get the data on the screen. Whereas we're then kind of handling that UI layer. Obviously there are, it's a spectrum in a way that I'm happy to embrace. Like there's a lot of gray areas. Like we don't have like this super clean delineation of like designers do this and engineers do that. But I think that's good. And it just, it's like, it's solved easily every day by just being like, okay, here's 10 things we all have to do. Who's going to do what? And then projects go just fine.
I was listening to an interview on Rick Rubin's show with Arvind, one of your co-founders, and it was a great interview. And it was clear that he really cares a lot about design and the product experience. And you were the founding designer at Perplexity. Is that true?
Yeah.
So what was that experience like, and how did you get to know the founding team? And what was their vision that excited you to work there?
Yeah, so I worked with two of the other founders before at Quora. We worked together on the feed team. And after Quora, they all went to do just like more stuff in machine learning or AI. And they started the company just kind of with like, hey, LLMs are interesting. Let's start a company. There's something to this stuff. And this is before ChatGPT had come out. And then they were toying around with ideas and building prototypes. And at some point they hit me up because they're like, we should have someone to do the UI. And I'm the only designer that they probably ever met. And so I got lucky. So I started working with them and just kind of like, I had been doing another startup. So I was very much in like startup mode, just like writing code every day, building stuff, throwing ideas out the window. I was certainly in this like rapid iterative headspace. And so I just jumped in, we started building stuff. We built like a completely different product before. And then eventually we kind of like landed on this, basic version of Perplexity. And, I think like, a lot of the energy that I brought to the team, there's maybe like two things. One, I just built all the UI, and so they didn't have to think about it. And naturally, whether they realized it or not, I was shaping like a lot of the product because of that. And it was like a way for me to kind of like very freely kind of like first principles put together. Okay, what would an answer engine actually work? How would that work? How do we, we weren't really thinking about Google. We weren't thinking about any other product. Just like, okay, you need to ask questions. You need to see the answer. And follow-up questions just felt like such a natural engagement loop. And so then this sort of the construct of this like linear thread, came about, but one where it's just like question, answer into an infinity. So, we were kind of like just shaping it and building it. And I think like by just kind of building what was in my head and not really having to explain it that much and showing them, I think they realized that, a designer can kind of open a new world that nobody else had imagined, if that makes sense. I do think that's like the largest value that a product designer can bring is like, hey, there's like way more outcomes than you can imagine, if you just like let somebody like run with an idea. And cause, fast forward, like we ended up with something that like basically nobody else had. And because everyone else was copying each other, meanwhile, I was just like dead set on pushing what was, what felt novel and different and just so much more thoughtful. And so they like got on board with that. Just, I think naturally they started to see like, oh, there's a lot of value in this way of thinking. And I think there's sort of this like snowball effect, I think, of like the value of like product design, product designers that code, brand strategy, like everything kind of culminated to, I think, like Ervin, I know had not really thought about any of this before, but he pretty quickly got it and supported us and let us really cook, as he likes to say. And so, yeah, I think we're really lucky to like have a leader who like really does support us in that way without like getting in the weeds and changing it. You know what I mean? Like how often do you have like a leadership that understands design and respects it, but like lets it happen? So I think that's like a unique thing going on here.
I think it's fascinating that there are so many founders, engineers, people out there that still don't understand what value design offers a company. You know, that and not abstract value, but like real concrete, tangible value that can be created. There's a reason why people pay lots and lots of money for luxury cars, luxury goods,
right,
et cetera, because it makes you feel something different, and there's real value in that. I wonder if you could say more. You said they probably didn't know any other designers, and they didn't realize that there was something else that a designer could bring to the table. When I think of design and engineering brings a really great focused understanding of detail, of how something will work. Mm-hmm. But design is the telescope, this broad view of being able to see the big picture of how all of this stuff fits together. So you've got this microscope and telescope symbiosis there. Yeah. How do you think about design and engineering and how they plug in?
Yeah, I mean, I found that like I can be an engineer on any day, and I can be a designer on any day, and it's so easy to get like too zoomed in as an engineer and forget about like to forget that, you know, on one example, to forget that like, hey, this interface, this whole product could actually be completely reorganized to be a different way, and if you reorganize it slightly, it'll all work differently, even if the code's the same. You know, there's this sort of composition part of product design that I think designers just are more comfortable imagining. You know, like in my head, I could look at Riverside and like rethink how it could work. That's like that seems to be harder to do for people that aren't designers. The big thing that happened, I think, for us was like we had been building our prototypes. ChatGPT launched, and I was like, "Hey guys, this is not a consumer product, obviously." And they're like, "What do you mean? Like, what does that even mean?" You know, and I, you know, the hardest part about being an intuitive person is like having to explain your intuition. Like, I think I'm maybe like slightly better at that than I was 10 years ago. But it's like, look, you have to log in to use it. You have to, you know, it's confusing. It's called ChatGPT. It's like the interface is confusing. What is an AI model? You know, you kind of like, I broke it down for them, and I was like, you know, we have an opportunity to build something for everybody. If we just think differently and we approach things differently and make different trade-offs. And I think like that kind of strategic, like when you really kind of meld strategic, like company strategy with design, that really opened it all up, I think, in our conversations. So that was like a lot of the early value that I think I brought. It's just sort of like opening up that type of thinking to everybody. Very quickly, I think we were rewarded for that. If, you know, like people were telling us back what we had been talking about internally. People would say like, "Oh, it's the best tool for answers." I'm like, okay, well, we just put that in the UI, and so now people are saying that's what it does. That means we're winning.
Design Better is supported by Miro. I've been in more meetings than I can count where I walked away feeling like we didn't solve the problem that we needed to. And guess what that means? More meetings. There should be a better way for people to collaborate and work through ideas together. Turns out there is. Miro's Innovation Workspace is an intelligent platform that brings people into a shared space to do their best work. I've used Miro to run workshops and design sprints with product designers around the world. And I've watched design and marketing teams work together to turn rough ideas into concrete plans in short meetings. Miro AI can turn unstructured data like sticky notes or screenshots into usable diagrams, product briefs, data tables, and prototypes in minutes. It just accelerates everything. And you can also generate roadmaps and diagrams, tables, content, and more with Miro AI, dropping it all into a collaborative canvas. People who are afraid to draw feel comfortable in Miro because they can write notes, they can give feedback, and communicate their ideas with the easy-to-use tools built in. Help your teams get great work done with Miro. Check out Miro.com to find out how. That's Miro.com, Miro.com.
Aaron and I talk and have written in our newsletter before about the power of writing for designing good products. And most famous example is probably Johnny Ive, who starts every project with writing. And curious if you use writing as part of your design process, and if so, why it's important to you.
Yeah, I sometimes do. I mean, I try to be very concise. I think, there are a few questions that always need to be answered, right? Like why are we doing this? Who's going to use it? And how's it going to work? And I find that without writing those down, you get problems, at the very least, lack of efficiency. But it does create I think a consolidation of all, the how people think. And because the alternative is, I think if you don't do writing, then you have to do mock-ups. And that's a waste of time, to go and have to do a lot of mock-ups just to get everyone to get on the same page about what you're building. You don't want to have to block everything on mock-ups. And so I think writing really gets you to a nice anchor, as long as people read it. So certainly I like to start with just something, at least a vision that is clear.
Thinking about how your team operates, things that you focus on, speed is a really important value for you.
Yeah.
You're developing and spending less time on static mock-ups. You're building kind of real time. If you had a magic wand, would you export from the way that your design team operates to other software companies out there?
It works so differently in every company. I think the one that maybe bothers me the most is when design as an organization is used as a visualizer for leadership, particularly the anxiety of leadership. We don't know what to do. Let's ask the design team to explore 10 options, build prototypes, just go off and not actually solve real problems. I think when design gets sort of disconnected from the practice of problem solving, then you have, it's just I don't know, I think it's kind of wasted. And so when the whole product development cycle gets when it ends up on this side path of making, in the end, did the product get better actually, and is anyone even learning anything? What's happening is it's so much easier every day to make new things, the amount of code generated by a human is 10xing. And so what's going to happen is, you're going to have to make a lot more decisions on a higher cadence. There's no reason to do quarterly planning anymore. You should do bi-weekly planning, and you got to reorganize how you make decisions and how frequently you do, because you can make stuff really fast. And if you can make anything and you can make it really fast, someone has to decide what you're making. How's it going to work? How's it going to look? How's it going to feel? And who better to do that than designers? Who's most comfortable making those sort of those decisions when there's infinite choices, the people that are used to it, that are used to navigating that kind of creative process, or the problem solving process. So I do think that's what I'd like to export, is just a little bit of a reset of what does the designer even do?
Yeah, I like that.
Henry, we often close up with a question about, what's inspiring you right now, but specifically, I'm interested, just given that you're deep in this realm, what's inspiring you as far as AI tools, and how are you personally using AI in your life right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the worst person to ask, because I put myself in a scenario where I only use Perplexity. because, it's the ultimate dog fooding experience. Like, I'm going to try to use this thing until it breaks and then try to make it better. I don't use anything else really. We play with a lot of stuff on like the brand design side. We use Midjourney and Crea and like, whatever new thing helps us be expressive on brand. But I'm trying to use Perplexity and I'm trying to break it. I'm trying to make it better. So, that is like dominating my life. I am inspired though by, I do think like we can change anything about like how people interact with software. I feel very excited to just like try to take a crack at like everything. I feel empowered to do that. I think like, we've had, a lot of momentum, like challenging the sort of how things operate and like the most commonly used pieces of software, categories of software. It's very inspiring to just be like, okay, what if it worked differently? And then we try to build it. And then some people like it. And then, that's a beachhead. And then we go forth from there. And so I think that's already happening with Comet. So I'm very inspired by that. And then I think like, cause I also lead the brand team. I'm just inspired by the fact that like, it doesn't seem like most tech companies think about brand at all. And so that's just a huge opportunity for us. I mean, because there's whole industries where they only compete on brand. So there's like so many playbooks and so many ideas to be inspired by and borrow from. You said it earlier. It's like you look at cars and watches and alcohol and cereal, like whatever. There's just like so many stories being told, and so many people fighting on the edge of just their brand. And so just to kind of get to like absorb all of that and pick and choose what's interesting to us and then bring that in, it's just like another extra thing that we get to throw into our strategy.
Such an interesting job that you have, Henry, and such a fun way that you're approaching it. But where can people learn more about Perplexity and more about you?
You can go to perplexity.com, or you can go to perplexity.com/Comet. And I'm on Twitter, but it's Henry Modisett.
Fantastic. Henry, thanks so much for being on Design Better.
Cool. Thank you for having me.